After performing a venipuncture, what is an essential post-procedural care step? So something you should do after the venipuncture is performed. Now, when you look at all of these choices, just taking a glance at everything, we want to keep in mind our patient ABCs, right? ABC, you might have heard about it in your basic life support classes, like your CPR classes, or just from your medical experience in general. Airway, breathing, and circulation. These are the three most crucial aspects to human life to keep us alive. So that means airway. You have to be able to have your airway open so you can properly breathe. You can't have any obstructions. That's needed for sustained life. Breathing, you need your airway open so that you can breathe and circulate the oxygen through your body. And then that leads to circulation. You need your heart to be pumping and you need your blood to be moving all around to keep you alive. Now, I'm not saying that after a blood draw, if you continue to bleed, that this is not going to be sustainable of life, but this is something that's important, that you don't want any extra bleeding if not necessary. So let's keep in mind our patient ABCs as we go through the choices of these steps. So option A says asking the patient to lift heavy objects immediately after. Now, this doesn't sound very necessary. There's no real contraindications on what the patient can and can't do after receiving a venipuncture. They could go back to their regular activities, but it doesn't really seem necessary to make them lift something heavy immediately after getting the blood draw, especially because they can have extra bleeding from lifting something from the strain, and that's just not necessary right after this procedure. So we can eliminate option A. Option B says advising the patient to keep the bandage on for a week. And that sounds a little excessive. If they keep the bandage on that long, they could start to get some irritation on the skin. And by that point, any bleeding from the blood draw would have clotted by now. So we don't need to keep on a bandage for that long. Option C says recommending to the patient to avoid drinking water for 24 hours. And that is definitely not necessary. Remember, this is the post-procedural phase, so there's no fasting at this point. And even if there was fasting at this point, they could still drink water during that time. So not drinking water after 24 hours would not be a good decision. It's important for patients to stay hydrated, so that would not be a good option. Option D says applying pressure to the venipuncture site, applying pressure to prevent bleeding. And that goes with our basic steps to sustaining human life. Circulation, you don't want to add any extra bleeding. That is not necessary to the patient's condition. So you do want to apply pressure and eventually put on a bandage. So you could go with option D.